I never imagined that a simple act of kindness could open the door to something so complicated, something that would change not only my relationship but the way I saw everything around me. It started with a backache, nothing serious at first, just one of those everyday things you ignore until it nags you for too long. My husband, Daniel, noticed. He's always been thoughtful in that way. He told me to lie down, said he'd seen a few massage techniques online and just wanted to help me feel better. I didn't think twice. After all, we'd been married for 6 years, and if there was one thing I believed, it was that I could trust him without question. That evening felt normal. Soft music playing in the background, the scent of lavender filling the room from an old diffuser I hadn't used in months. Daniel sat beside me with that usual calm smile he wore when he wanted me to relax. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have someone so attentive. He said he was just trying to help, but looking back, there was something different in his tone. Not exactly wrong, just something I couldn't quite name. The massage started gently. His hands moved carefully across my back, his voice low as he asked if the pressure was okay. I closed my eyes and let my guard down. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was just craving that moment of peace. But what happened next shifted everything, subtly at first, almost invisibly. It wasn't about the touch. It was the pause. The hesitation. A sudden change in his breathing, the kind you wouldn't notice unless you were really listening. I opened my eyes. He avoided looking at me directly, brushing it off with a nervous laugh when I asked if something was wrong. I wanted to believe it was nothing. That I was reading too much into it. But something in me, something deep, felt off. And that feeling only grew stronger with each passing day. In the days that followed, I started noticing little things. Unlocked screens. Quiet text notifications. A shift in his sleep patterns. That night's massage had opened more than sore muscles, it had opened questions. And every time I tried to ignore them, the silence between us seemed to get louder. I told myself stories to stay calm. That maybe he was stressed from work. That maybe the intimacy of that night had stirred something innocent. But the tension wouldn't go away. And when I finally found the message hidden in his phone, the truth I uncovered left me staring at the wall for hours, unable to cry, unable to scream. Because it wasn't just about the message, it was about who it was from. Someone I knew. Someone I never thought I'd have to question. That massage, the one he said was just to help, it was the beginning of something neither of us could undo. And as I stood there, phone in hand, heart pounding, I realized this story wasn't about a backache anymore. It was about betrayal, layered, silent, and already too deep. The name on the message hit me like a slap. It wasn't some stranger or unknown number. It was Emily. My best friend. The one person I had leaned on through every hard moment in life, through my mom's illness, through job changes, through Daniel's early struggles when he couldn't find steady work. She was the one who brought us groceries once when we were low on money, the one who'd sit on my couch drinking coffee and telling me how lucky I was to have a man like him. And now, her name sat there on his phone, attached to a message that read way too casually for comfort. Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about it. I just stood there, frozen. The room felt too still. My breathing felt loud, like it didn't belong in the quiet. My first instinct was denial. Maybe there was another explanation. Maybe she was talking about something else. But then I scrolled. And the more I read, the more the pieces of my perfect little life began to fall apart. The messages weren't graphic, but they were personal, too personal. There were mentions of being careful, of keeping things smooth, and a shared memory about a time when I was supposedly asleep. I didn't know which part hurt more, Daniel's betrayal or Emily's. I wanted to confront him, to scream, to ask why. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to understand the full story. My mind went back to that massage. The softness in his voice. The change in his breathing. The way he touched me like he was trying to convince himself of something. Now I wondered if that moment was guilt or comparison. Over the next few days, I tried to act normal. I needed time to observe, to listen without reacting. And I did. I noticed how he flinched when Emily's name came up casually in conversation. How his tone got defensive when I mentioned her stopping by. I started replaying every conversation I'd had with her for the past month. The way she started giving vague excuses for not hanging out. How she once told me she was figuring out her own situation but never gave details. All those signs I had brushed off came rushing back with new meaning. I felt like I was living with strangers. Two people I trusted more than anything, now hiding something from me. I didn't know how deep it went or when it started, but I knew one thing: it hadn't ended. I started keeping track of things, not out of paranoia, but because I needed clarity. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Every conversation with Daniel felt layered, like he was saying one thing but thinking something else. He still cooked dinner, still kissed me on the forehead before leaving for work, but the warmth felt different, like someone going through motions. And then there was Emily. She stopped replying to my texts. When I called, it went to voicemail. She hadn't blocked me, but it was clear she was avoiding me. That silence told me more than any message ever could. One afternoon, I drove past Emily's place just to see if she was home. Her car was there, parked slightly crooked, like she had rushed in. I waited. I didn't even know what I was hoping to see. I was halfway through convincing myself to leave when I saw him, Daniel, coming out of her apartment building. He didn't see me. He looked around quickly, then got into his car and drove off like it was just another errand. My heart dropped into my stomach. So it wasn't over. Whatever they had started, it was still happening. That night, I said nothing. I stared at the man I had married and wondered who he really was. My mind kept flashing back to all the times I trusted him blindly. I thought about the trip we took to Vermont last fall, how he had held my hand by the lake and promised we were building something strong. And then I thought about how easily he had walked out of Emily's place like it meant nothing. I began to wonder if there were more secrets. Was it just her? Or had there been others? The doubt crept in like a fog I couldn't shake off. In the middle of all this, I found myself questioning my own choices. Was I too trusting? Too comfortable? Had I missed something early on that would have warned me? Friends started asking why I seemed distant, but how could I explain it? How could I tell them that my marriage, my friendship, and my own sense of reality were quietly collapsing while I smiled through small talk? And still, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed more. I needed proof not just for him, but for myself. Because part of me still didn't want to believe it was all real. The next few days felt like I was living in a movie where I already knew the ending, but I had to keep playing my part. I smiled when I needed to, laughed at the right moments, and pretended I didn't know what I knew. Inside, though, I was unraveling. I barely slept. My mind was stuck in a loop, replaying that message, that visit to Emily's apartment, and the strange tension in our home that kept thickening like smoke. Daniel started noticing my distance. He asked if everything was okay, and I lied. I told him work had been stressful, that I was just tired. He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Maybe he knew I was onto him. Or maybe he was just wrestling with his own guilt. Either way, something shifted between us. He got quieter. More careful. He stopped leaving his phone around like he used to. Started taking longer showers, locking the bathroom door, even when it wasn't necessary. Every little thing he did added fuel to the fire burning inside me. I decided to test him. I told him I was going to visit my sister for the weekend. I packed a small bag, kissed him goodbye, and left. But I didn't go far. I stayed with a friend a few blocks away and kept an eye on our house. I needed to know what he would do when he thought I was gone. The first night passed without anything unusual. But the second night, everything changed. At around 8:30 p.m., I saw Emily's car pull into our driveway. I didn't breathe. I watched from the shadows, my heart racing so loud it hurt. She got out, checked her phone, and walked up to the door like she'd done it 100 times before. It only took seconds before Daniel opened the door and let her in. No hesitation. No fear. Just comfort. I didn't move. I couldn't. I sat frozen in my car as the porch light turned off. The silence that followed felt louder than any fight could have been. That was the moment I realized whatever they were hiding wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. A life they had started building in the shadows while I clung to what I thought was real. And I knew that the moment they walked out of that door, everything would change. I sat in that car for what felt like hours, numb and shaking. I kept telling myself to get out, to walk up and knock on that door, to end the guessing. But something inside me held back. Maybe I wasn't ready to hear the truth out loud. Maybe I was still clinging to the last bit of hope that there could be some explanation. Anything other than what it looked like. But then something happened I wasn't expecting. A second car pulled up. I squinted through the windshield, confused. It wasn't anyone I recognized right away. A man stepped out, tall, maybe mid-30s. He looked unsure, hesitated for a moment before approaching the house. He didn't knock. He just stood there at the edge of the porch, looking at his phone, then back at the house. Something about the way he moved felt off. Then he turned slightly, and I saw his face under the streetlight. It was Emily's ex, Brian. I hadn't seen him in almost a year, not since their messy breakup that Emily never talked about in detail. She always said he was controlling, moody, not worth her energy. But here he was, outside my house, looking like a man with a purpose. My chest tightened. What was he doing here? And how did he even know Emily was inside? He paced for a while before walking back to his car, then returned again, still without knocking. Something told me he was debating whether to confront her. I knew I wasn't the only one with questions that night. And suddenly, this wasn't just my secret to carry anymore. There were more eyes watching. More emotions tangled up in this mess than I had prepared for. Inside the house, the lights flickered for a second, just enough for me to catch a shadow move near the window. I grabbed my phone, ready to take a photo, some kind of proof, when Brian stepped forward and finally knocked. Hard. Not once, but 3 times. The tension hit me like a wave. I couldn't hear what was being said, but the door opened. Emily appeared, her expression frozen in a mix of shock and fear. Daniel came into view just behind her. For a second, no one moved. Then Brian said something that made Emily throw a quick glance over her shoulder at Daniel. Daniel's face dropped. He looked stunned, like whatever Brian had said cut deeper than any of us expected. And in that moment, I realized something else was going on. This wasn't just a simple affair. There was a secret between the 3 of them that I hadn't uncovered yet, something they had all kept hidden. I wasn't just dealing with betrayal. I was standing at the edge of a truth that could shatter all of us. And I still didn't know if I was ready to hear what came next. I didn't realize I was gripping the steering wheel so tight until my fingers started to ache. My eyes were locked on the scene unfolding on my porch, Daniel, Emily, and Brian all standing in a triangle of tension, their faces dimly lit by the hallway light spilling out from inside. Emily looked like she wanted to disappear. Daniel looked caught, like his world had just cracked open. Brian, though, he looked calm. Too calm. And that made everything worse. Then I saw Brian pull something from his pocket. It wasn't a weapon or anything threatening, it was a small folded piece of paper. He held it up and waved it once, slowly, before handing it to Daniel. Emily tried to stop him, grabbing his wrist, whispering something I couldn't hear, but it was too late. Daniel opened the paper, read it, and then everything changed. His knees buckled slightly. His mouth dropped open like the floor had just vanished beneath him. Emily started crying, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the kind that came from deep inside, the kind where you know it's over. I didn't understand what I was seeing. I had already convinced myself the betrayal was between Daniel and Emily. I thought I had seen the full picture. But I was wrong. I got out of the car, heart pounding, and walked straight toward them. No one noticed me until I reached the bottom step. Daniel looked up, his face pale. "You knew?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't answer. Neither did Emily. It was Brian who finally spoke. "You should know the truth," he said quietly. "It wasn't just an affair. Emily was pregnant. And she told both of us the baby was ours." Time stopped. I looked at Daniel. His eyes were glassy. "She told me 2 months ago," he whispered. "Said it happened before we ever," he trailed off. My head was spinning. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was biological. They had both been lied to. And the truth? The truth was that Emily had played both sides, using our marriage and her past with Brian to hide her own secret. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Emily, waiting for her to deny it. But she didn't. She just cried harder. "I didn't know who to trust," she said through tears. I panicked. I thought if I told the truth, I'd lose both of you. And in that moment, the anger I had for Daniel shifted. Not completely, but enough for me to see the cracks that had led us here weren't just his. We had all been part of something bigger, something none of us saw coming. As I turned to leave, unsure of what the next day would look like, Daniel called out softly, "Where do we go from here?" I paused, then looked back and said, "Wherever it is, it won't be the same." And just when I thought it was over, my phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. "You don't know the full story yet. Meet me tomorrow. It's about Emily." I stared at the screen, heart pounding all over again. The message kept replaying in my mind the whole night. "You don't know the full story yet. Meet me tomorrow. It's about Emily." I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, who could it be? Another piece of the puzzle I didn't even know existed. As the sun came up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the message again, my coffee cold beside me. I had already uncovered betrayal, secrets, and lies that flipped my life upside down. Part of me wanted to ignore it and just walk away from everything. But something deeper pushed me to find closure. I needed answers, not just for myself, but to truly be free of it all. I agreed to meet the sender at a quiet park near the city library. I kept it low. No calls, no warnings to Daniel. I had to face this alone. A woman was already sitting on the bench when I arrived. She looked nervous but familiar. She introduced herself, her name was Rachel. She worked with Emily at a wellness clinic months ago. And then she dropped the final truth. Emily had been in a complicated relationship long before reconnecting with Brian or crossing the line with Daniel. Rachel said Emily had confided in her, mentioning she had faked parts of her pregnancy timeline to protect someone else. But when it started spiraling out of control, she pulled in both men, hoping one would claim the child and the other would quietly back off. The truth? The baby wasn't Brian's. And it wasn't Daniel's either. It belonged to someone Emily had been seeing during a silent break from everything, someone who left the country before things got serious. My chest tightened, not from heartbreak this time, but from the absurdity of it all. Everything I had gone through, the suspicion, the pain, the emotional roller coaster, had stemmed from a single thread of dishonesty. And now I had the full picture. When I told Daniel what I learned, he didn't even look surprised. He was quiet, tired. He admitted he'd already started looking for an apartment, not out of guilt, but because deep down, he knew the damage between us had run too deep. We didn't fight. We just sat on the couch, two people who once loved each other, now silently letting go. In the end, Emily moved to another city to raise her child. Brian cut ties completely. And me? I decided to start over. I found strength I didn't know I had. I learned that trust, once broken, rarely returns the same way. And while pain isn't something anyone asks for, it does teach you who you are when everything else falls away. So when people ask me now what happened that night, the night of that innocent massage, I just smile. Because the truth is, it was never just about the massage. It was the moment the curtain was pulled back. A moment that forced me to see the truth, face it, and finally choose myself. Infidelity, secrets, and betrayal nearly destroyed me. But healing, clarity, and truth helped me rise again. 30.